Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he walked down the busy London street. His hands shook as he pulled his baseball cap lower over his eyes. 3 weeks had passed since he ran away from his old life in Chicago. 3 weeks since he made the biggest mistake of his life. Marcus was not a bad man. He had worked as a security consultant for 8 years. He helped companies protect their money and important information. He was good at his job. He had a nice house, a car, and most importantly, he had his daughter Emma. Emma was 8 years old and the most important thing in his world, but 6 months ago, everything changed. Emma got sick, very sick. The doctors said she had leukemia, a type of cancer that attacks the blood. The treatment was expensive, very expensive. Marcus had some money saved, but it was not enough. His insurance would not pay for the best treatment. The doctor said Emma needed special medicine that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Marcus tried everything. He asked his family for help, but they did not have that kind of money. He went to banks to get loans, but they said no. He started a fundraising page online, but the money came in too slowly. Every day that passed, Emma got sicker. The doctors said time was running out. That is when Marcus made his terrible choice. He had access to his company's client accounts. It was his job to watch over these accounts and make sure they were safe. The company trusted him completely. They never thought he would steal from them. Late one night, Marcus sat in his office staring at his computer screen. The client accounts showed millions of dollars. More money than he could ever imagine. He thought about Emma lying in her hospital bed. He thought about how this money could save her life. Before he could change his mind, he moved $2.3 million from the client accounts into his own bank account. For 2 days, Marcus felt relief. He could finally pay for Emma's treatment. But then his boss called him into the office. The company had discovered the missing money during a routine check. They knew it was Marcus. They called the police immediately. Marcus panicked. He took Emma from the hospital and drove to his brother's house 3 states away. He left Emma there and promised he would come back for her soon. Then he drove to the airport and bought a ticket to London with cash. He thought he could hide in the big city until he figured out what to do next, but hiding was harder than Marcus thought. He had seen enough movies to know that the police would be looking for him. They would check hotels and rental cars. They would watch his bank accounts and credit cards. He could only use cash, and the money he had with him was running out fast. Marcus spent his days walking around London, trying to blend in with the tourists. He wore different clothes every day and kept his head down. He slept in cheap hostels, paying cash and using fake names, but he was always scared. Every police car made his heart race. Every person who looked at him twice made him want to run. The worst part was not being with Emma. He called his brother every day from payphones to check on her. His brother said Emma kept asking when Daddy was coming home. She was getting sicker, and the doctor said she needed to start treatment soon. But Marcus could not go back. Going back meant going to prison. And if he went to prison, he could not help Emma at all. After 2 weeks in London, Marcus was running out of money and hope. He had tried to think of ways to get back to America without being caught, but it seemed impossible. The police were looking for him everywhere. He had seen his face on the news and on wanted posters. Marcus was also getting paranoid. He started to think that everyone was watching him. The man reading a newspaper on the park bench looked like a police officer. The woman at the coffee shop seemed to stare at him too long. The hotel clerk asked too many questions. Marcus could not tell if these people were really suspicious or if his mind was playing tricks on him. On his 3rd week in London, Marcus made another bad decision. He went to a pawn shop and bought a gun. It was an old revolver that the shop owner said worked. Fine. Marcus had been in the military before he became a security consultant, so he knew how to use guns. But he had never owned one for protection before. Marcus told himself the gun was just for safety. London was a big city, and he was carrying all his remaining cash with him. But deep down, he knew the real reason. He was scared of being caught. He was scared of going to prison and never seeing Emma again. The gun made him feel like he had some control over his situation. The day everything changed started like any other day. Marcus woke up in a small hostel room in East London. He had barely slept because the man in the next room was snoring loudly all night. Marcus looked at himself in the small mirror. He had lost weight, and his eyes looked tired and scared. He barely recognized himself. Marcus counted his money again. He had less than £200 left. That was enough for maybe 3 more days if he was careful. After that, he did not know what he would do. He could not call his brother to ask for money because the police might be watching his brothers. Marcus decided to walk to the center of London that day. He thought maybe he could figure out a plan if he was around other people. He took the underground train and got off near Westminster. The area was full of tourists taking pictures of Big Ben and the other famous buildings. As Marcus walked around, he started to feel like someone was following him. He looked over his shoulder several times and saw the same 2 men behind him. They were wearing regular clothes, but something about them seemed like police officers. Marcus started walking faster. The men behind him also walked faster. Marcus turned a corner quickly and looked back. The men were still there. His heart started beating very fast. He was sure they were police officers trying to arrest him. Marcus started to run. He pushed through crowds of tourists and ran down side streets. When he looked back, he could not see the men anymore, but he kept running anyway. His chest hurt from running so hard and sweat was dripping down his face. Finally, Marcus stopped running when he reached a big gate with guards standing outside. He did not know where he was, but he could see it was some kind of important government building. There were guards in red uniforms and big black hats. Standing very still by the gate, Marcus tried to catch his breath and figure out what to do next. He reached into his jacket and felt the gun in his pocket. The metal felt cold against his hand. He looked around and still thought he saw people watching him. That is when Marcus made the decision that would change everything. He was tired of running. He was tired of being scared. He was tired of being away from Emma. He decided he would rather fight than be caught like a trapped animal. Marcus did not know that the building behind the guards was connected to the royal family. He did not know that the guard he was about to approach was trained to protect some of the most important people in England. All Marcus knew was that he was desperate, scared, and armed. And that combination was about to create a situation that no one could have predicted. Sergeant James Wellington had been standing guard at St. James's Palace for 4 hours that morning. The October air was cool, but his thick red uniform kept him warm. His tall black hat, called a bearskin, sat perfectly straight on his head. He had been doing this job for 8 years, and he took great pride in it. James was 29 years old and came from a small town in northern England. His father had been a soldier, and his grandfather before that. The Wellington family had a long history of serving their country. When James was 18, he joined the army like his father wanted. But James wanted to do something special. He wanted to be one of the guards who protected the royal family. It took James 3 years of hard training to become a Queen's Guard. The training was not just about learning to march and stand still. James learned how to spot danger from far away. He learned how to protect important people. He learned how to stay calm when other people were panicking. Most importantly, he learned that his job was not just about looking good in a uniform. His job was to keep people safe. The Queen's Guards are famous around the world. Tourists come from everywhere to see them standing perfectly still outside the royal palaces. Many people think the guards are just for show, like actors in a play. But James and the other guards are real soldiers with real training. They carry real weapons, and they know how to use them. On this particular morning, James was stationed at the main gate of St. James's Palace. This palace is where many members of the royal family have their offices. It is not as famous as Buckingham Palace, but it is just as important. James had to watch everyone who came near the gate. He had to decide who was a harmless tourist and who might be a threat. James loved his job, but it was not always easy. Standing still for hours was harder than most people thought. His feet hurt and his back ached. But James never moved unless he had to. Moving without permission would get him in serious trouble. The hardest part of the job was dealing with tourists. Some tourists were respectful and just wanted to take pictures, but others tried to make the guards laugh or move. They would tell jokes, make funny faces, or even try to touch the guards. James had learned to ignore all of this. He would stare straight ahead and pretend the tourists were not there, but James was always watching. Even when he looked like he was not paying attention, he was studying every person who came near. He looked for people who seemed nervous or angry. He looked for people who were carrying bags or packages that might contain weapons. He looked for anyone who did not belong. That morning, James noticed a man who caught his attention immediately. The man was walking back and forth in front of the palace, but he was not acting like a normal tourist. Normal tourists took pictures and moved on. This man kept looking over his shoulder like he was scared of something. The man was wearing a baseball cap pulled down low over his eyes. His clothes were wrinkled and he looked like he had not slept well. Most strange of all, the man was sweating even though it was not very warm outside. James had learned that people who sweat for no reason are often nervous about something. James watched the man for about 10 minutes. The man kept walking back and forth, but he never took any pictures. He never looked at the palace itself. Instead, he kept looking at the other people around him. James started to think this man might be planning something bad. The man also kept reaching into his jacket pocket like he was checking to make sure something was still there. James knew that people who carry weapons often do this. They touch their weapon to make sure it has not fallen out or been stolen. James wanted to call his supervisor, but he could not move from his position or use his radio unless there was immediate danger. The rules were very clear about this. James had to wait and watch. After a few more minutes, the man started walking directly toward the palace gate. James stood up a little straighter and got ready to act. As the man got closer, James could see his face better. The man looked scared and desperate. His eyes were darting back and forth and his hands were shaking. When the man was about 10 feet away from the gate, James stepped forward. This was the signal that the person needed to stop and identify themselves. James had done this thousands of times before with tourists who got too close. "Sir, this area is restricted," James said, in a firm but polite voice. "You need to step back, please." But instead of stepping back like most people did, the man kept walking forward. James could see that the man was breathing very hard like he had been running. The man's eyes were wide with fear, and he kept looking behind him. "Sir, I need you to stop right there," James said, this time more firmly. James was starting to get worried. This man was not acting like a confused tourist. He was acting like someone who was in serious trouble. The man stopped walking, but he did not step back. Instead, he stared directly at James. For a moment, neither of them moved. James could see that the man was trying to decide what to do next. James had seen this look before in dangerous situations. It was the look of someone who was about to do something desperate. "Are you all right, sir?" James asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Sometimes when people were having mental health problems, a kind voice could help calm them down, James hoped. This was just a confused or lost tourist, but the man did not answer. Instead, he started reaching into his jacket pocket. James felt his heart start beating faster. He had been trained for this exact moment. When someone reaches for something in their jacket after acting strangely, it usually means they are reaching for a weapon. James had several options. He could call for backup using his radio. He could draw his own weapon. He could try to tackle the man before he could pull out whatever was in his pocket. But James was also trained to try to solve problems with words first, if possible. "Sir, I'm going to need you to slowly remove your hand from your pocket," James said, his voice now very serious. "Keep your hands where I can see them." The man looked at James with a strange expression. It was not anger or hatred. It was more like sadness and fear mixed together. The man's eyes were watery, like he was about to cry. "You don't understand," the man said quietly. "They're going to catch me." "I can't let them catch me." James realized this man was not a terrorist or someone trying to hurt the royal family. This was someone who was running from the police. But that did not make him less dangerous. People who are desperate and scared sometimes do terrible things. "Who is going to catch you?" James asked, trying to keep the man talking. As long as they were talking, the man was not pulling out whatever was in his pocket. "The police," the man said. They've been following me. I saw them back there. I can't go to prison. My daughter needs me." James felt a little bit of relief. This man was not trying to hurt anyone in the royal family. He was just a fugitive who was scared of being arrested. But James also knew that scared people with weapons were very dangerous. "Sir, whatever trouble you're in, pulling out a weapon is not going to help," James said. "Let's just talk about this." The man laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had given up hope. "You think I have a choice?" the man said. "You think I want to be here? My little girl is dying and I'm the only one who can save her, but I can't save her if I'm in prison." James could hear the pain in the man's voice. This was not a career criminal or someone who enjoyed hurting people. This was a father who was desperate to help his child. But James also knew that desperate people sometimes made very bad decisions. "What's your daughter's name?" James asked, hoping to make a personal connection with the man. "Emma," the man said, and his voice broke a little when he said it. "She's 8 years old, and she has cancer. The treatment costs more money than I could ever make legally. So I took some money that wasn't mine. And now they want to put me in prison for trying to save my daughter's life." James felt sorry for the man. But he also knew the situation was getting more dangerous by the second. The man's hand was still in his jacket pocket, and other tourists were starting to notice that something was wrong. James made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. Instead of calling for backup or trying to arrest the man, James decided to trust his instincts about people. This man was not evil, he was just desperate and scared. "What's your name?" James asked. "Marcus," the man replied. "Well, Marcus, my name is James, and I think we need to figure out a better way to help Emma than whatever you're planning to do right now." But even as James said these words, he could see Marcus's hand starting to move in his pocket. Whatever was about to happen next, James knew it would test everything he had learned in his 8 years as a guard. Marcus Chin's hand moved slowly inside his jacket pocket. His fingers wrapped around the cold metal of the gun he had bought 3 days earlier. Every part of his body was shaking, but not from the cool London air. He was shaking because he knew that what he was about to do would change his life forever. James Wellington watched Marcus's movements carefully. In his 8 years as a Queen's Guard, James had been trained to spot weapons and dangerous people. He could see that Marcus was about to pull something out of his pocket. James's training told him to call for backup immediately, but something about Marcus made him wait just a few more seconds. Time seemed to slow down as Marcus pulled his hand out of his pocket. The black revolver caught the morning sunlight as Marcus raised it with both hands. The gun was pointed directly at James's chest, just a few feet away. At this distance, if Marcus pulled the trigger, James would almost certainly die. The moment the gun appeared, everything around them exploded into chaos. A woman tourist screamed loudly. A man shouted, "Gun! He has a gun!" in a thick American accent. People started running in every direction, pushing and shoving to get away from the danger. Children were crying as their parents grabbed them and ran toward the street. An elderly couple fell down as people rushed past them, but no one stopped to help them up. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Get as far away as possible from the man with the gun. James heard all of this happening around him, but he kept his eyes focused on Marcus. The gun was still pointed at his chest, and Marcus's finger was on the trigger. James could see that Marcus was crying now. Tears were running down his face, but his hands holding the gun were steady. According to his training, James should have immediately drawn his own weapon. Queen's Guards carry loaded rifles, and James could have shot Marcus before Marcus could shoot him. But something stopped James from reaching for his rifle. Maybe it was the tears on Marcus's face. Maybe it was the way Marcus had talked about his daughter Emma, or maybe James just knew that more violence would not solve anything. Instead of drawing his weapon, James did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He looked directly into Marcus's eyes and spoke in a calm, quiet voice. "You don't want to do this," James said. Marcus's hands were shaking now, and the gun was moving up and down slightly, but it was still pointed at James's chest. "Yes, I do," Marcus said, but his voice was weak and unsure. "I have to." They're going to catch me and put me in prison, and then Emma will die. I won't let that happen. Behind Marcus, James could see that other Queen's guards were moving into position. They had heard the screams and seen people running, and they knew there was a dangerous situation at the main gate. James knew that in just a few moments, there would be a dozen guards with rifles pointed at Marcus. If that happened, Marcus would definitely be shot and killed. The other guards would not try to talk to Marcus like James was doing. They would see a man with a gun threatening one of their fellow guards, and they would shoot to kill. James raised his hand slightly, hoping the other guards would see it and know that he wanted them to wait. It was a risky move. If Marcus saw James making signals to other people, he might panic and pull the trigger. Marcus, listen to me, James said, still keeping his voice calm. I understand that you're trying to help Emma, but if you shoot me, you won't be helping her. You'll just make everything worse. How do you know? Marcus shouted, and for the first time his voice was really angry. How do you know what's best for my daughter? You don't even know her. James took a small step forward. It was a dangerous move because it brought him closer to the gun, but James wanted Marcus to see that he was not afraid. You're right, James said. I don't know Emma, but I know that she needs her father alive, not dead or in prison for murder. Marcus made a sound that was half crying and half laughing. She needs her father free, he said. And I'm never going. To be free, they're going to catch me and put me away forever. James could see that Marcus was getting more upset, and upset people with guns were very dangerous. James needed to find a way to calm Marcus down, but he was running out of time. The other guards were getting closer, and soon they would be close. Enough to take action. Then James made a decision that went against every rule he had ever learned as a Queen's Guard. He slowly reached up and took off his tall black bearskin hat. Then he bent down and placed it on the ground next to his feet. This action shocked everyone who saw it. Queen's Guards never remove their hats while on duty. It was one of the most important rules of the job. But James was not thinking about rules anymore. He was thinking about saving lives. What are you doing? Marcus asked, confused by James's action. I'm showing you that I'm not just a guard in a uniform, James said. I'm a person, just like you. And I want to help you find another way to save Emma. Marcus stared at James for a long moment. The gun was still pointed at James's chest, but Marcus seemed less sure about what he wanted to do. There is no other way, Marcus said quietly. Do you think I didn't try everything else first? Do you think I wanted to steal that money? Do you think I wanted to run away and leave my little girl in the hospital? James could hear the pain in Marcus's voice, and he felt sorry for him. But James also knew that feeling sorry for someone did not make it okay for them to point a gun at you. Tell me about Emma, James said. What is she like? This question seemed to surprise Marcus. For a moment, his expression changed from angry and scared to sad and loving. She's the most beautiful little girl in the world, Marcus said. And his voice was much softer now. She has long brown hair and big brown eyes. She loves to draw pictures of animals. She wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up. As Marcus talked about Emma, James noticed that the gun was lowering slightly. Marcus was still holding it, but it was no longer pointed directly at James's chest. She sounds like a wonderful little girl, James said. She must be very proud of her father. She was, Marcus said, and the tears started flowing harder. But what is she going to think when she finds out that her daddy is a thief and a criminal? James took another small step forward. He was now close enough that he could probably grab the gun if Marcus was not paying attention, but that was still very risky. She's going to think that her daddy loves her very much, James said. She's going to think that her daddy tried everything he could think of to save her life. But I failed, Marcus said. I stole all that money and I still couldn't save her. Now she's still sick and I'm going to prison. James could see that Marcus was breaking down emotionally. The gun was now pointed at the ground instead of at James, but Marcus's finger was still on the trigger. Marcus, it's not over yet, James said. Emma is still alive, right? Marcus nodded. Then there's still hope, James said. But not if you shoot me. Not if you spend the rest of your life in prison for murder. Marcus looked up at James with confusion and desperation in his eyes. "But what else can I do?" Marcus asked. "If I put this gun down, they're going to arrest me. If they arrest me, I go to prison. If I go to prison, Emma dies." James realized that Marcus really believed these were his only two choices: shoot someone or let his daughter die. James needed to show Marcus that there were other possibilities. "Marcus, what if I told you there might be another way?" James said. "What if there was a way to help Emma that didn't involve you going to prison for murder?" Marcus stared at James suspiciously. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about people who help sick children," James said. "I'm talking about charities and organizations that exist just to help families like yours." "I already tried that," Marcus said bitterly. "I started a fundraising page. I asked everyone I knew for help. Nobody has that kind of money." "But you didn't try everyone," James said. "You didn't try me." This statement seemed to shock Marcus. He looked at James like he could not believe what he had just heard. "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. James took another step forward. Now he was only about 3 feet away from Marcus and the gun. "I mean that my wife works for a charity that helps children with cancer," James said. "I mean that there are people in this world who want to help Emma, but they don't know she exists yet." Marcus was staring at James with wide eyes, like he was trying to decide if James was telling the truth or just trying to trick him. "You're lying," Marcus said finally. "You're just trying to get me to put the gun down so you can arrest me." "I'm not lying," James said calmly, "and I can't arrest you. I'm not a police officer. I'm just a guard who wants to help a little girl." "Named Emma get better?" For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Marcus was still holding the gun, but it was pointed at the ground now instead of at James, around them. James could see that the other guards had formed a circle, but they were staying back and letting James handle the situation. Marcus looked at James with tears in his eyes. "Why would you help me?" he asked. "I just pointed a gun at you." James smiled slightly. "Because you're not a bad person, Marcus. You're just a scared father who ran out of good choices. And because everyone deserves a second chance to do the right thing?" Marcus Chen stood there with the gun in his hands, staring at James Wellington in complete disbelief. In all the weeks he had been running and hiding, no one had offered to help him. Everyone he met saw him as a dangerous criminal. But this guard, this man he had just threatened with a gun, was offering to help save Emma. James could see the confusion and hope fighting each other in Marcus's eyes. For the first time since this whole situation started, Marcus looked like he was not sure what to do next. The gun was still in his hands, but it was pointing at the ground now instead of at James. "I don't understand," Marcus said quietly. "Why would you want to help me? I'm a criminal." "I stole money. I pointed a gun at you." James took another small step forward. He was now close enough to Marcus that he could touch him if he reached out his hand. "Because I'm a father too," James said simply. This statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. His mouth opened slightly and fresh tears started running down his face. "You have children?" Marcus asked. "A daughter," James replied. "She's 6 years old. Her name is Sophie." Marcus closed his eyes and took a deep, shaking breath. When he opened them again, James could see that something had changed in Marcus's expression. "What would you do if Sophie was dying and you couldn't afford to save her?" Marcus asked. James thought about this question for a moment before answering. He wanted to be honest with Marcus. "I don't know," James said. "I hope I would find another way. But I understand why you did what you did. I understand that you were desperate." Around them, the crowd of tourists had moved much farther away, but they had not left completely. Some people were taking pictures and videos with their phones. James knew that this whole situation was probably being broadcast live on social media, but he tried not to think about that. The other Queen's Guards were still maintaining their positions around Marcus and James, but they were not moving closer. James could see his supervisor, Sergeant Major Davis, standing about 20 feet away. Davis looked very worried, but he was letting James continue to handle the situation. "Marcus," James said, "I want you to do something for me. I want you to tell me more about Emma. Tell me about her treatment. Tell me exactly what the doctor said." Marcus wiped his eyes with his free hand, but he kept holding the gun with the other hand. The doctors said she has acute lymphoblastic leukemia, Marcus said. It's a type of blood cancer that happens mostly in children. They said the regular treatment has about a 60% chance of working. That doesn't sound too bad, James sighed. But Emma is not responding to the regular treatment, Marcus continued. The cancer is getting worse instead of better. The doctor said there is an experimental treatment that works better, but it costs $300,000. My insurance won't pay for experimental treatments. James felt his heart break a little as he listened to Marcus's story. He could not imagine being in Marcus's position, watching his child get sicker and not being able to afford the treatment that could save her. Where is Emma now? James asked. She's with my brother in Ohio, Marcus said. She thinks I'm away on a business trip. She doesn't know that her daddy is a fugitive hiding in another country. James could hear the pain in Marcus's voice when he talked about leaving Emma. It was clear that being away from his daughter was almost as hard for Marcus as watching her get sick. Marcus, I need to tell you something, James said. My wife Sarah works for a charity called the Children's Cancer Foundation. They help families who can't afford cancer treatment for their children. Marcus looked at James with suspicion again. How do I know you're not just making that up? James slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Marcus tensed up and raised the gun slightly, but James moved very slowly to show that he was not trying to trick Marcus. I'm going to call Sarah right now, James said. You can listen to our conversation. You can hear for yourself that this is real. Marcus stared at the phone in James's hands. You would really do that? You would call your wife while I'm pointing a gun at you? Yes, James said simply. Because I think Sarah might be able to help Emma. James pressed a button on his phone and held it up so Marcus could hear both sides of the conversation. The phone rang 3 times before a woman's voice answered. Hello, James, Sarah said. Aren't you supposed to be working right now? Hi, Sarah, James replied, trying to keep his voice calm and normal. I'm still at work, but something important has come up. I need to ask you about the foundation. What about it? Sarah asked, and James could hear the concern in her voice. If a child in America had leukemia and needed experimental treatment that cost $300,000, would the foundation be able to help? There was a pause before Sarah answered. It would depend on the specific situation, but yes, we have helped with cases like that before. James, why are you asking? And why do you sound so strange? Marcus was listening to every word, and James could see hope starting to appear in his eyes for the first time. I'll explain everything later, James said to his wife. But right now, I need to know, if I brought you information about a case like this today, how quickly could the foundation make a decision? For a child who needed immediate treatment, we could have an emergency meeting of the board within 24 hours, Sarah said. James, you're scaring me. What's going on? Everything is going to be okay, James said. I love you, and I'll call you back in a little while. James hung up the phone and looked at Marcus. Marcus was staring at him with an expression of complete amazement. That was real, Marcus said, and it was not a question. That was really your wife, and she really works for a charity that could help Emma. Yes, James said. It was real. Marcus looked down at the gun in his hands, then back up at James. But what about me? He asked. Even if they help Emma, I still stole that money? I'm still going to prison. Maybe, James said honestly. I can't promise you that you won't face consequences for what you did. But I can promise you that shooting me won't make those consequences go away. It will just make them much, much worse. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, thinking about what James had said. If I put this gun down, Marcus said slowly, what happens next? Well, first you put the gun down, James said. Then we call the police because they're going to come anyway. But before they get here, I call my wife back and give her all the information about Emma, and then we see if we can get help for your daughter, and then I go to prison, Marcus said. Maybe, James said again. But if you put that gun down without hurting anyone, that's going to count for something. And if you cooperate with the police and help them understand why you Took that money, that's going to count for something too. Marcus looked around at all the guards who were still surrounding them. There are so many of them, he said. If I put this gun down, they're going to tackle me and arrest me. James turned around and looked at Sergeant Major Davis. He made a small gesture with his hand and Davis nodded back. Sergeant Major Davis, James called out, if this man puts his weapon down voluntarily, can you assure him that he will be arrested peacefully? Davis stepped forward a few feet. If he puts the weapon down and does not resist, we will not use unnecessary force, Davis said in a loud, clear voice. Marcus looked at Davis, then back at James. How do I know I can trust any of you? Because we're not your enemies, Marcus, James said. We're just people doing our jobs, and our job is to keep people safe, not to hurt them. Marcus was quiet again, and James could see that he was trying to make the most important decision of his life. If I do this, Marcus said finally, if I put the gun down and let them arrest me, you promise you'll call your wife about Emma? I promise, James said without hesitation. You promise you'll give her all the information she needs? I promise. You promise you'll do everything you can to help her get the treatment she needs? Marcus, James said, looking directly into his eyes, I promise you that I will do everything in my power to help Emma get better. But I can only do that if you put that gun down right now. Marcus looked down at the gun one more time. Then he looked back up at James. Her favorite color is purple, Marcus said suddenly. What? James asked, confused. Emma's favorite color is purple, Marcus repeated. And she loves dogs more than cats. And she always asks me to read her the same bedtime story 3 times before she goes to sleep. I want your wife to know that Emma is not just a case file or a charity project. She's a real little girl with a real personality who deserves to grow up and become a veterinarian. James felt tears coming to his own eyes now. I'll make sure Sarah knows all of that, he said. Marcus took a deep breath and looked around at all the people watching him. Tourists with cameras, guards with weapons, and James Wellington, the man who had just offered to save his daughter's life. Okay, Marcus said quietly. I'm going to put the gun down now. Marcus Chung slowly bent down and placed the gun on the ground next to James Wellington's bearskin hat. As soon as the weapon left his hands, Marcus felt his legs give out underneath him. He collapsed to his knees on the cold pavement and began to sob. The sound of Marcus crying was not like normal crying. It was the sound of weeks of fear and desperation finally being released. It was the sound of a man who had been carrying an impossible weight on his shoulders and had finally been able to put it down. James immediately knelt down next to Marcus and put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. This was not something a Queen's Guard was supposed to do, but James was not thinking about rules anymore. He was thinking about being a human being. It's okay, James said quietly. You did the right thing. Around them, the other guards moved in quickly to secure the weapon and the area, but they followed Sergeant Major Davis's promise. They did not tackle Marcus or use any unnecessary force. They waited for him to stop crying before they asked him to put his hands behind his back for the handcuffs. I'm sorry, Marcus said to James as the guards put the handcuffs on him. I'm so sorry I pointed that gun at you. I'm not a violent person. I just didn't know what else to do. I know, James replied. And I'm going to help Emma, that's a promise. As the guards led Marcus away to wait for the police, James picked up his bearskin hat and his phone. The first thing he did was call his wife Sarah back. James, thank God you're okay, Sarah said as soon as she answered. I've been worried sick. What was that phone call about? Sarah, I need you to sit down, James said. I'm about to tell you a story that's going to be hard to believe. James told Sarah everything that had happened. He told her about Marcus pointing the gun at him. He told her about Emma's cancer and the experimental treatment. He told her about Marcus stealing the money and running away to London. He told her about the promise he had made. When James finished the story, Sarah was quiet for a long time. James, she finally said, you could have been killed. I know, James replied, but I wasn't. And now we have a chance to save a little girl's life. Tell me everything you know about Emma's case, Sarah said, and James could hear that she was already switching into her work mode. James repeated everything Marcus had told him about Emma's condition and treatment needs. Sarah asked many detailed questions, and James wished he could ask Marcus for more information, but Marcus was now in police custody. "I'm going to call an emergency meeting of the foundation board for this afternoon," Sarah said. "If everything you've told me is accurate, this is exactly the kind of case we exist to help with." While James was talking to his wife, news about what had happened was spreading quickly. Several tourists had recorded the whole incident on their phones, and the videos were already being shared on social media. Within an hour, news reporters from all over London were arriving at St. James's Palace. James was not allowed to talk to the reporters while he was still on duty, but Sergeant Major Davis spoke to them briefly. Davis said that one of his guards had successfully de-escalated a dangerous situation without anyone being hurt. He said he was proud of James Wellington's actions. The reporters also found out that Marcus had been arrested and was being held at a local police station. They learned that he was wanted in America for embezzling $2.3 million from his employer, but they also learned about Emma and her cancer, and that part of the story made many people feel sorry for Marcus. By evening, the story was on news websites all over the world. The headlines varied, but they all told the same basic story. American fugitive points gun at Royal Guard, gets help instead of bullets, and Queen's Guard offers to help sick daughter of man who threatened him. James finished his shift and went home to Sarah. She had spent the entire afternoon working on Emma's case. She had contacted the hospital in Ohio where Emma was being treated. She had spoken to Emma's doctors about the experimental treatment. She had called Marcus's brother to get more information about the family's situation. The foundation board met at 4 o'clock, Sarah told James when he got home. "We voted unanimously to approve funding for Emma's treatment." James felt a huge weight lift off his shoulders. "All of it?" he asked. "All of it," Sarah confirmed. $300,000 for the experimental treatment, plus additional funds for her family's living expenses during treatment. Emma can start the new treatment as early as next week. James hugged his wife tightly. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me," Sarah replied. "This is what we do. This is why the foundation exists." The next morning, James was given permission to visit Marcus at the police station. Marcus was being held while the American and British governments worked out his extradition back to the United States. When James walked into the small interview room, Marcus looked up with surprise. "James," Marcus said, "what are you doing here?" "I came to tell you about Emma," James said, sitting down across from Marcus at the small metal table. James explained about Sarah's foundation and the emergency board meeting. He explained that Emma's treatment had been approved and fully funded. He explained that Emma could start the new treatment immediately. As James spoke, Marcus's eyes filled with tears again. But these were different tears than the day before. These were tears of relief and joy. "She's going to be okay?" Marcus asked, his voice shaking. "The doctors can't make any promises," James said honestly. "But she's going to get the best treatment available. She's going to have every possible chance to get better." Marcus put his head in his hands and cried for several minutes. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red, but his expression was peaceful for the first time since James had met him. "I don't know how to thank you," Marcus said. "You don't need to thank me," James replied. "You just need to focus on being the best father you can be to Emma, no matter what happens to you." Marcus nodded. "What is going to happen to me?" "I don't know," James said. "That's up to the courts. But I can tell you that a lot of people understand why you did what you did. The story has been on the news, and many people are saying that you were just trying to save your daughter." "I still broke the law," Marcus said. "I still stole that money." "Yes, you did," James agreed. "But you also chose not to hurt anyone when you had the chance. And that's going to matter when the judge decides your punishment." James was right about this. Over the next several weeks, as Marcus's case moved through the courts, public opinion was largely sympathetic to him. Many people saw him as a desperate father rather than a dangerous criminal. Marcus was eventually extradited back to the United states, where he pleaded guilty to embezzlement charges. But because he had cooperated with the investigation and had not hurt anyone during the incident in London, he received a relatively light sentence of 3 years in prison. More importantly, Emma responded well to the experimental treatment. Within 6 months, her cancer was in remission. She was able to return to school and resume her normal childhood activities. She never had to know that her father had pointed a gun at a stranger in order to try to save her life. James and Sarah stayed in contact with Marcus's family throughout Emma's treatment. They sent cards and letters to Marcus in prison, updating him on Emma's progress. They also sent pictures that Emma had drawn, including many pictures of animals in purple crayon. When Marcus was released from prison after serving 2 years, he found a job working for the Children's Cancer Foundation. He used his business skills to help other families navigate the complex world of childhood. Cancer treatment and funding. On the anniversary of the incident at St. James's Palace, James received a card in the mail. Inside was a picture of Emma, now a healthy 10-year-old girl, standing next to a large golden retriever puppy. On the back of the picture, Marcus had written, "Thank you for showing me that there are still good people in the world. Emma is doing great and wants to be a veterinarian more than ever. We will never forget what you did for us." James showed the picture to Sarah, and they both smiled. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked. "Do you ever wish you had just followed protocol and called for backup immediately?" James thought about the question for a moment, looking at the picture of Emma and her puppy. "Never," he said finally. "Some situations can't be solved with rules and protocols. Sometimes you just have to trust that people are basically good even when they're making bad choices." The incident at St. James's Palace became a famous story that was told in police academies and military schools around the world. It became an example of how de-escalation and human compassion could solve problems that violence could not. But for James Wellington, it was never about becoming famous or being a hero. It was simply about doing what felt right in a moment when a desperate father needed help instead of punishment. And for Marcus Chun, it was a reminder that even in the darkest moments of life, when all hope seems lost, there are still people willing to extend a hand to help rather than a weapon to harm. Emma grew up to become a veterinarian, just like she had always dreamed. She specialized in treating animals with cancer, inspired by her own experience as a cancer survivor. She never knew the full story of what her father had done to save her life, but she always knew that she had been surrounded by people who cared about her. In the end, that was what mattered most.